Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Romine, and this is the Houston Grass Podcast. We are just a few days left in June of 2024 here, and it is hot outside, as one might imagine. It has gotten really hot, really humid. That's great for growing grass, and at the farm, that makes the grass grow back exponentially faster when it gets hot and humid like this. And especially we've been getting regular rains. The rain has been good and frequent and not excessive, at least here in the south part of Houston for this month. So we'll see what July holds. More heat, no doubt. This morning we want to talk about the heat. Talk about our Texas climate and the hot summers that we have and the effects that has on taking care of established grass. I guess primarily what we're going to talk about is how that affects the taking care of established grass as well as when you're planting new grass. This and the importance of picking the right kind of grasses and stuff for the right areas. The grasses that we sell, of course, are all can handle the heat that we have here. Some may do a little bit better than others with that heat, but for the most part, obviously, we're not selling cool season grasses or anything like that are going to have an issue. All the grasses, whether we're talking about the St. Augustines, the Zoysias, or the Bermuda grasses, can handle this heat. Some of them may require a little bit more water than others. Before I get into the topics that I have here, though, I would like to talk about a couple of things that maybe the two biggest issues that we are talking on the phone all day, every day, this time of year with people about. A lot of people sending pictures and stuff like that. First, because we are having regular rains, at least up to this point, we're not talking about chinch bugs. If we get into the more drought situations, chinch bugs feed on that drought-stressed grass, so we would be talking about chinch bugs at that point. Right now, that is not the issue. The number one issue that everybody is having right now is gray leaf spot. Gray leaf spot is a fungus that the grass gets this time of year, and like it or not, the healthier your grass is, the more susceptible it is to gray leaf spot, because a gray leaf spot needs a few different things. One of them is this high heat, high humidity that just comes around every year. It's part of living here. So you've got that input. You also it comes from excessive moisture. So if you're watering your grass like you're supposed to, that's one of the ingredients that it needs, as well as higher nitrogen. So if you buy some of our grass that has a lot of nitrogen in it, because we fertilize a lot to have it be the deepest, thickest, prettiest green that we can get, that also feeds this fungus, unfortunately. So at our farm, we do treat with fungicide every 30 days. We are encouraging everybody, especially if you're planting grass in the shade, to treat with some Heritage G fungicide in the first week of planting. So especially palmetto. Palmetto, people call us, or the cobalt for that matter, our other shade tolerant variety of the St. Augustine. If you're planting grass in the shade, the sun, obviously, kind of as you would think with a fungus, the sun kind of cooks it. If the grass is out in full sunlight, you're not going to have as big of an issue with gray leaf spot most of the time, because the sun kind of kills that fungus and dries the grass out after you water or after a rain. But in the shade, it can be a bigger issue, and as a matter of fact, being in that shade, it can actually kill the grass if it's left untreated. So you've got to be on the lookout for it. It's easy to identify. It starts out as just little brown specks. We've got lots of pictures and lots of places of pictures of gray leaf spot. Maybe we can post one here. You'd see the individual blade of grass, and then no bigger than the size of the end of your pen, there'll be a brown dot of grass that looks dead on that blade, and then eventually it'll be a few dots, and eventually, not after very long, the whole blade of grass turns brown and just kind of disappears. So that's how you identify the start of it. Also, if it kind of gets that yellowy, sickly color. So that's identifying it in grass that's there. Planting grass this time of year is a challenge. People call us all the time year-round and ask what's the best time of year to plant grass, and we'd always say spring. March, April, and May are the best times. Second best time is fall. We have a long fall here, September, October, November, even into December. Ideally, you want those more moderate temperatures, so you're not having to water as much. The gray leaf spot is not as big of an issue, but even dead middle of winter is a better time of grass than summer to to plant it. If you got to do it, you got to do it. You got ugly bare spots. You just have to be mindful of some of the things that have to be done. Say you do plant grass in the middle of summer, and most time if you're planting it in full sunlight, I would tell you that the only penalty is a higher water bill, because you're going to have to water it a lot more than you would say in November or something like that. So that's not a problem most of the time in those areas where you do have the full sun. But if you are planting grass in a shadier area, and specifically if it's dense enough shade to where you're planting palmetto in the area, the gray leaf spot can be a real problem. And if you're buying, as a matter of fact, if you call here and order palmetto, 9 times out of 10 we are going to have a conversation with you about how you need to treat with how gray leaf spot is an issue, how you need the preventative way. Again, the farm is treating with fungicide once a month, but we never know where we are going to get the grass in that cycle, how long it's been since they put that fungicide out. So we are going to encourage everybody that buys a pallet of palmetto St. Augustine to put out the Heritage G on top of it within the first couple of days of laying it to try to prevent that gray leaf spot, because you're going to have all the ingredients. You're going to have the higher nitrogen, you're going to have the higher moisture, because you're going to have to dump water on it, just like you do when you plant grass any time of year for that first day, and specifically, and then even that first week you're going to have to put a lot of water on it. And then when you've got the, like I said, the high heat, high humidity, those things and then you put some shade in there, you're inviting the gray leaf spot. So doing things like the Heritage G, it does a fantastic job of preventing it. If you get it, it also is a great curative, but it's better, what do they say, an ounce of prevention. That is the number one topic that I want to touch on with everybody this time of year, is staying on top of being mindful of this. Yes, this is not the ideal time of year to plant grass. You absolutely can. It's just going to take some more water, and you're going to have to be mindful of not too much. There is such thing as overwatering, unfortunately. You can invite that gray leaf spot if you overdo it. So just be mindful of that, and planting grass is no problem. Like I said, I apologize in advance for the $300 water bill, though, that can kind of come along with that if you just have to replace grass this time of year. Now let's talk about some of the other topics that we want to touch on here. Choosing the right type of grass for our area. Our area is kind of misleading. Any of the grasses that we sell work fantastically in our area. However, if you have a shade situation where you're getting less than 6 or 7 hours of direct sunlight per day, then we need to talk about some of the more shade tolerant varieties of grass. That's usually one of the first questions that we're going to ask when you're ordering grass. First, we're going to ask you we'd like to ask you where you're located to make sure we can service your area, because there's some places we just can't. It's not feasible for us to drive to from the south part of Houston, especially if it's for a fairly minimal order. But the next question is going to be, how much shade do you have in the area? Because if you call and tell me you want to plant Bermuda grass, and oh, by the way, I've got 2 huge oak trees, we're going to say absolutely not. That's never going to work, because Bermuda grass needs 100% sunlight, and if it doesn't get that, it will fade away in a big hurry. If you get 6 or 7 hours of sunlight, you can do any of the other grasses. You can do any of the St. Augustines. You can do any of the Zoysias. When you get into that less than 6 or 7 hours of sunlight, it starts narrowing down the varieties that are available to you quite a bit. That's when you get into the palmetto or the cobalt St. Augustines, or the fine-bladed Zoysias, like the emerald or cavalier Zoysia. So that shade, I guess, is what dictates to us the types of grass, the varieties of grass that are available to most people. So if you've got full-on sunlight and a wide-open lot somewhere, then the sky's the limit. You can put any grass out there that you want. Oh, I did not mention the Palisade Zoysia. As long as you get at least 6 or 7 hours, the Palisade Zoysia is another option other than the regular St. Augustines. And Palisades is a fantastic choice. Palisades is a beautiful grass, and it avoids some of the issues that some of the St. Augustines and the Bermudas have, and it's really easy to take care of. I think that's the most beautiful part of it. But again, you do have to get that 6 or 7 hours of direct sunlight, in my mind, for it to thrive. So let's see. the benefits of each of those grasses, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. When everybody thinks of the reason a lot of these neighborhoods are starting to require people to put Bermuda grass in their yards is because they have excellent drought tolerance. And so that's fantastic, and it's a good idea. However, we discourage, if you are given the choice, we discourage most people from putting Bermuda grass out in their yard unless they're required to by an HOA or something like that, because Bermuda grass in most of our yards, even if you have a large, in our small houses and small lots with houses on them, there is eventually going to be a tree or a fence or a house that creates some shade that's going to thin that Bermuda grass out over time. Even on a large lot with a large house where you might have a wide open area that Bermuda grass would work in, eventually there's gonna be a tree, or it's gonna encounter a house where it's going to thin the grass out. So that is Bermuda's biggest weakness, I would say, is its lack of shade tolerance. You do have to be sure that you stay on top of your pre-emergence and stuff like that with Bermuda grass, because in my mind it's just not quite as dense as some of these other grasses, so it doesn't do quite as good a job of keeping out the weeds as the St. Augustines and Palisade Zoysia in particular. I feel like some of those grasses are a little bit thinner, so they do allow weed seeds that are just blowing around out there in Mother Nature to, and when those seeds find a spot on bare dirt somewhere, they're going to germinate. If sun can penetrate through to that dirt and germinate that seed, guess what? Weeds are popping up there. And these thicker, denser grasses, that sun can't penetrate to that soil, so it never gets a chance to get started. A good, healthy, thick turf is the best prevention for weeds coming up in your yard. So that's kind of the strengths and weaknesses of the Bermuda grasses. St. Augustine, I would say the biggest strength is everybody's in this part of the world has grown up around it. They know what it takes to take care of it. It does do a good job keeping the weeds out, keep being thick and keeping the weeds out, as long as you're doing your part, which is mowing weekly, fertilizing 3 to 4 times a year, and regular watering. If you're not doing those things, I would say that you're neglecting the grass a little bit, and you may be asking for some issues. In some cases you may get away with it. In some cases you're going to eventually pay a penalty of some sort, whether it's in the form of excessive weeds or dead spots because you're not cutting it every 2 weeks instead of every 5 to 7 days. You're going to stress the grass out a lot, especially when it's this hot, especially if we get hot and dry this time of year. So you need to be mindful of that. All these grasses, as far as St. Augustine, if you looked at a chart of Bermuda grasses, St. Augustine, Zoysias, they're going to rate, and as drought tolerance goes, I think Bermuda grass would rate towards the top as far as drought tolerance. St. Augustine is going to be below that a little bit. But when we talk about drought tolerance, we're usually talking about some studies that take the water totally away from grass for some extended amount of time, and now which one, when we reapply the water, is going to come back the thickest or recuperate the fastest. That is not a homeowner situation in my mind. On the side of a road somewhere where there's nobody watering, that's going to matter a lot more. Nobody I've ever talked to says they want to have brown, ugly grass. I think if you live in Austin and San Antonio, they have to tolerate grass going dormant during the summer because of heat and drought and water restrictions. In Houston, everybody wants their grass to be thick and pretty and green. To do that, every grass that I sell requires 1 inch of water per week, whether it's falling out of the sky or coming out of a hose when it gets hot and dry like this. If the grass is green and growing and not dormant, it requires 1 inch of water per week. When the temperatures moderate a little bit, early spring and late fall and whatnot, winter, obviously shouldn't be watering hardly at all probably. You can probably back off that 1 inch a little bit, but for the most part, most of the year here, especially when it gets really hot, you've got to get that 1 inch of water on all of these grasses to have them thrive. I would say those are the benefits and the fallbacks. St. Augustine, it also, the seasons that come around every year and the issues with St. Augustine, we get you can get gray leaf spot in the summer, which you can prevent. I'd say one of the biggest things that everybody gets is brown patch in the fall. You get the big yellow circles, Heritage G can also prevent that, or if you see it pop up before you get a chance to prevent it, you can treat it with the Heritage G. So there are issues with St. Augustine, but nothing that can't be fairly easily dealt with. Pros and cons to St. Augustine. The Zoysias, the Palisade Zoysia, there is not many drawbacks to Palisade Zoysia in my mind other than the price tag. Palisades does require more sunlight. It requires more like the regular St. Augustine, the 6 to 7 hours, whereas the fine bladed Cavalier and Emerald can survive on more like 4 or 5 hours. So it might just be that you don't have a choice. I like Palisades because it is just like taking care of St. Augustine. If you grew up taking care of St. Augustine, or that's what you've had before, the Palisades is a perfect grass because you mow it the same, you fertilize it the same, you water it the same. You can mow it with a traditional mower and it will look just fine, as opposed to the finer bladed Zoysias. In my mind, they really need to be mowed with a real mower. Not many people do that or have a lawn service that does that. Also, the finer bladed Zoysias, just like those Bermudas that we talked about, in my mind they're a little bit thinner, have a tendency to get a few more weeds in them than the Palisades. The Palisades is very thick and carpet-like, and just like the St. Augustine, it does a better job in my mind of naturally keeping those weed seeds out and keeping them from germinating. So we talk about the different grasses and their pros and cons throughout the year, but I kind of wanted to touch on all those, and that kind of does just give a brief overview of that. We have touched on water a little bit here, but let's talk about what an optimal watering schedule looks like. So we'll talk about if you're just using a hose and a sprinkler, you need an inch of water a week, and you do absolutely need to be mindful of, if we're getting supplemental help from Mother Nature and it's raining, that's better, because rainwater always makes everything grow better than the water coming out of a hose. So if it's a long hot dry, we're going to talk about in the times that I'm going to give you as if it's not raining at all and we're having to do 100% supplemental irrigation. If you have a hose and a sprinkler, the only way to make sure that you're getting this right is to buy a couple of rain gauges, stick them out in the yard, or the old tuna can trick. Stick those out in the yard and see how long it takes to put out a half inch or an inch of water. I can tell you that at my house, with a hose and a sprinkler, the sprinkler that's got all the holes in the bar and it kind of goes back and forth slowly, it takes about 4 hours to put out an inch of water. Most of the time I tell people that, and their jaw kind of drops. It takes 4 hours in one place, not 4 hours moving it around here, here, and here. 4 hours in one place to put out an inch of water with that type of sprinkler. So in that case, ideally what you would do is you would do it twice a week. So you would do 2 hours on 2 separate days. I like to always time my watering where it is the morning after I have mowed. So the grass gets mowed on Tuesday, say, my irrigation system comes on Wednesday, and then it goes off 3 to 4 days later, kind of split the week up, because hitting that grass with water right after you mow helps with the stress of mowing it and helps it jump back up and recuperate. So with an irrigation system, people ask all the time, well, how long do I need to water? And again, we're talking about established grass here. We're not talking about new grass. But with established grass, you need to be watering 2 to 3 days a week, and you need to still that 1 inch of water. And starting the day after you mow, the pop-up style heads, the ones that pop up out of the ground into the tube there and just spray in one place for however long the zone is going off, those need about 12 to 15 minutes. As I have measured it, about 12 to 15 minutes to put out their half inch of water. The rotor heads, the ones that pop up and move back and forth slowly across a larger area, because they are covering a larger area, those need like probably 25 to 30 minutes per zone to put out that half inch of water. So again, all of these different heads have different settings to where the gallons per minute can be changed, and that is obviously going to affect how much water is being put out. So the only way to truly tell is with that rain gauge. So we also tell lots of people too, well, how do I know if I've watered enough? Well, I can tell you what they do at the farm is take a long handled screwdriver and go and stick it in the ground, and if it's hard to get in the ground and it comes out totally clean, you need to water, and you need to water quick and a lot. You push that screwdriver in the ground, it goes into the ground relatively easily. You pull it out, it's got some mud on it and some stuff stuck to it. You're probably okay for another couple of days. So there is that kind of non-scientific way to check as well. So that's watering. Obviously, if we're talking about watering newly installed grass this time of year, it is a whole different ball game. No matter where you plant it or what type of grass you plant, you've got to absolutely flood it in there the first day. I use those words with everybody, and we have people call us occasionally and say, I'm having problems with my grass, it's kind of brown. They send us pictures. We can tell that the grass is just dying of thirst, and we ask them, well, how long have you watered it? Oh yes, I've watered it tons. And well, how long did you water it? Well, I watered it 10 minutes. We're talking 8 to 10 hours of water with that first day with a hose and a sprinkler. Again, the hose and sprinkler, we're trying to put out 2 inches of water the first day that you lay that grass. So however long it takes to put out 2 inches of water. And again, the only way to tell is with the rain gauge. But you've got to walk out on that grass and feel it just squish and the ground give way under your feet, like after it's been flooding outside, and the ground just squish, squish, squish under your feet as you walk. You are taking it totally to the point of saturation, because what you're trying to do is seal that piece of grass to the ground. You want the dirt on that block of grass and the dirt on the ground. You don't want there to be any air pockets between those 2 points. If there are, those new little white roots come out of the bottom of that block of grass and hit that air pocket and they die. So yes, 10 or 15 minutes may freshen the grass and the blades of grass up on top of that block, but it is not sealing that grass to the ground like has to happen. Also, you've just ripped this grass out of the ground. We've stacked it on pallets and transported it on an 18-wheeler up here, and it's been 24 hours. The grass is very stressed out, so all of that water helps with that situation as well. So like I said, none of all these grasses that we're talking about, whether we're talking about Bermuda, St. Augustine, or Zoysia, have to be watered the same the first 2 weeks. I will say, if you're planting grass in the shade, you've got to be a little more mindful. It's a little bit more of an art. You can overwater, but for the most part, it's a lot harder to overwater when you're out in the sun, because that grass is taking a beating from that sun. 2 inches of water that first day, and then an inch of water each day after that for the first week. And then we tell people on that second week you can start backing off some, but it takes a lot of water in the summer to get grass going. Be mindful of the watering and don't underwater. If you're in the shade, don't overwater as well. Call us if you need a few more pointers on how to work your way through that. So common problems this time of year, we've already talked about the gray leaf spot a lot. I feel like that is, I'd say, the biggest issue. If this was a very hot, dry summer, we weren't getting any rain, we would be talking about chinch bugs as well. Chinch bugs feed on drought-stressed grass. We have not had one phone call this year about chinch bugs, though. We're getting good rains regularly. That's not to say the rain doesn't stop, and if it stops and just turns off totally, chinch bugs can absolutely show up in your yard. So should that happen, they're easy to get rid of. The issue is identifying them quickly. You pull in your house at 5 o'clock and you see hot, dry spots in the yard. It's important that you get a lot of water on those dry spots. They'll be kind of gray, and the leaf, instead of being big and open, kind of folds up. It's trying to protect itself and hold in that moisture. It's important to get water on the lawn immediately when you see that. Chinch bugs can be mistaken for drought stress because they are looking for that drought stressed grass. Before you go turn the water on, what may be a good idea to do is go get on your hands and knees over there and kind of part that grass, look down in there and look to see if you see any of those little bugs cruising around in there. And usually when they show up in large numbers. The adults have wings where their wings fold across their back. Usually they have white tips, so they make an X. If you see lots of little bugs crawling around in there, it'd be a good idea to get the water going immediately, but also hit the store and get something that treats chinch bugs. We always say to use a liquid. The easiest ones are the ones that screw on the end of a hose, and you just spray them out there. It's a contact killer, and it gets rid of them pretty quickly. You may have to do a couple of treatments, but if you are watering your grass I've never had chinch bugs in my yard because I'm watching it, but you're putting out your inch of water a week. I do have a few trees around, so that probably protects some of the areas if you're in the wide open sun. We did have some show up in a little corner up by our office last year. As long as you get out there, we sell the sayonara, which is the liquid that you screw on the end of the hose and you just spray it out there and it gets rid of them in a big hurry. We had to treat 2 times and watered, and the grass came back just fine. You let it go too long, chinch bugs, as they eat the grass, as I understand it, I haven't read up exactly, but I know that with chinch bugs, when they move in, they kill the grass. It's not that they damage it or eat the tops off of it like a sod webworm or something like that. They kill it. So when they move in, if you don't find them relatively quickly, you're going to be replacing that grass, because all that is going to come back there is weeds. So chinch bugs can be tough, especially when it gets hot and dry. So fertilizing, you should have fertilized. The super turf should have been used in May and June. If you didn't fertilize in May and June, I'm not sure what I would do when it gets really hot like this. If you don't follow any fertilization up with a significant amount of water, it can burn the grass. So this gets to be a dangerous time of year to put out fertilizer. We keep a little bit of super turf around because it does at least have the slow release nitrogen in it, to where the nitrogen is what burns your grass. When, say, you just put the fertilizer out there and we get a little sprinkle of rain or a heavy dew, that is enough to activate this fertilizer, but it's not enough to water it in thoroughly. That is how grass gets burned, or over application of the fertilizer as well. You can do that. You use the Nitrophos Super Turf 19410 with the slow release nitrogen in it. It's a lot more forgiving. As long as you water it in thoroughly with the ½ inch of water right after you put it out, the grass will appreciate it. But again, for future reference, that May, early June activity is when you should put that out. The next one we will be talking about is the fall special fertilizer, and we will be putting that out in probably like September, early October is when you should put out the fall special fertilizer. So we've touched on fertilizer, water, and some of the problems that we're seeing this time of year. I guess the only thing, mowing height. If you haven't raised your mowing height or told the folks that are mowing your yard to do that, now is a good time of year to do that. You definitely want to be the 4 to 4.5 inches as opposed to 3. Right now, you're trying to protect that grass. You're trying to stress it less by having a longer leaf. Allows that grass to gather more sunlight, and it also it shades that dirt and holds some of that moisture in. It's got a lot of the reason you keep your grass a little taller this time of year is there are several, but it is definitely a good idea to raise that mowing height this time of year, and that's an important thing to do. So that is all that I can think as far as taking care of grass right now. It is hot. If you do need to contact us, obviously the best way is to call us here at our office, 281-431-7441. You can also get a hold of us. We do have places you can email us, and the fact that we are not as crazy busy as we were in the spring, usually we can respond back to you with emails relatively quickly now. But again, the best way is always to call us and pick our brain over the phone. We're more than willing to chat about any issues you might have or questions or anything like that. We are going to be closed. We are on the cusp, end of June here. 4th of July is coming up, so we are going to be closed for July 4th, which is next Thursday. We will be open the rest of the time. We will be open that Friday, and we're here to answer any questions or fill any needs you have as grass goes. So thank you for listening.